Hi, welcome to the Buchanan 2021 Committee, our first meeting. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
I'm so glad nobody took a knee.
No, we don't do that here.
Relieved.
Okay, first what I'm going to do, so we all know each other, I'm going to go around the room. If you'd please give your name and the amount of time you've lived here in the Village of Buchanan. And Nick, we'll start with you, and then we'll go around.
Oh, you wanted to get me over with, right?
Well, yeah. Kidding.
So I'm on the village board, Nick Zachary. I've been in the village since 1991 and on the board for approaching 8 years.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Vicki Goldberg, and I have lived in Buchanan since 1987. I am on the Comprehensive Care Plan Committee as well.
Yeah, I'm sorry, we have to share the microphones.
That's all right, yes. Good evening. Joe Trappiano, former trustee in the village, lived in the village about, 40 years, I guess. I lost track.
It's a long story.
Ches Pasquale, currently on the village board, and I've been living in Buchanan since 2000, about 17 years.
Okay, good.
Eileen Absinger, 138 Tate Avenue. I've been a resident for, we're not going to say how many years, but I'm a native.
Okay, there you go. Thank you.
Jeremy Basso, 119 Bannon Avenue. I've been in the village since December of 14.
Thank you.
Michael Wenz, planning board member for 2 years and resident since 2009.
Kieran Outhouse, I've been in the village since 1999.
Okay, thank you.
Sal Tavano. I moved to Buchanan in 1955 when I was 5 months old with the help of my parents. And I've been here almost ever since. I left twice briefly for a couple of years and came right back. Couldn't stay away.
There you go. And I am Mayor Teresa Knickerbocker. I am, like Eileen, a native, and also like Sal. We've been here, we're long-time residents here. So what I'm going to do tonight, I'm going to give an overview starting on January 9th when the announcement was made to close Entergy, our largest employer and our largest taxpayer. And I'm going to bring us up to date where we are as of, 11 months later. What this committee was formed for mostly was to start an action plan going forward of how we're going to mitigate our losses. So we will begin this evening. We have a good mix of residents here, and I look forward to all your input, and we will figure out how to get through this challenge. Thank you all for agreeing to join the French Foreign Legion. No, thank you all for joining this group. I appreciate it, and the Village of Buchanan does. Okay, so the closure announcement was made on January 9th. And one thing I have to make very understood is we all knew at some point this plant would close, but we didn't realize it would close before 2034. So this was a surprise to all of us. Right after the announcement, I set up a trip to Vernon, Vermont. I went with Deb Malone, the executive director of the Hudson Valley Chamber of Commerce. Vernon, Vermont is another Entergy plant, and that's ahead of us through the decommissioning process. So I thought it was important to go there to talk to the elected officials and ask them, what would you have done differently going forward? So, experience with people who have gone through something is just invaluable. So they gave me, some information, some thoughts of going forward, what the process is. We toured the Vermont plant, much, much, much smaller than ours, but also on a major waterway. And what it did to their community. So, some of that background information was very good and what was needed. We went on, myself, Supervisor Puglisi, and Superintendent Joe Hochreiter. We were invited to a hearing in Albany. The chairperson of that was Senator Grippo. It was a long day, but it was very educational. They covered everything about decommission, everything you could think of closing a nuclear power plant. Also on that committee was Senator Murphy and our Assemblywoman Sandy Galiff. And I will tell you, the two of them are really fighting for this community. Also, someone who was very good on there, who was a native Peekskill resident and now lives in Long Island, was Senator Croce. And it was a pleasure to meet him. He is Joe Tropiano's nephew. So, small world. So, but at the hearing, Senator Grippo, after I gave my testimony, and it was basically what I said is, we're losing our largest employer, we're losing our largest taxpayer, the mitigation of losing this money, and, so I gave them an overview of what our loss would be. Senator Grippo asked me very quickly, he goes, okay, what are your two asks? My two asks were for transition money. I'm going from the world we live in now, where Entergy pays almost 50% of our revenue, the revenue to our budget. And the other thing was for economic development help. So fortunately, when the governor announced the state task force, which I'm part of, those were two of the things that were agreed upon that we will be receiving. The cessation fund is a fund that was set up, and what that does, it covers nuclear power plants that are closing and coal plants, so it's not just nuclear power within the state. And your losses have to be at least 20% of your revenue, and that's when the cessation fund kicks in. So your first year would be 80%, and it would go down 10% each year for 7 years, down to 10%. So that's not the answer for us. That's not, that's just the transition to get us, to where we need to be. So it's good to have that behind us. We are going to meet probably within the next month, the supervisor, myself, and the superintendent of schools will be meeting, talking about exactly how that works. So that's another meeting coming up. So the governor, when he set up the task force meeting, we've had 2 meetings so far. The next meeting will be in December. It will be December 19th. That will be the 3rd meeting. The first meeting was more of everybody introducing one another, so that not much got done that time. The second meeting, they hired a consultant, DL English, which will be looking at the Entergy property for economic redevelopment. So there's several lots within the Entergy, so it's not just the 60 acres. I've gone to some meetings where I have been I've been told that the property will never be developed because it's all contaminated, and that is not the truth. Every nuclear power plant, so everyone understands, does have some contamination. And at the last meeting, Riverkeeper had actually a map where they showed a plume, and it's basically where the plants are now operating. So the property I'm talking about, and everyone here has a copy of this, will be an area of property north. So it's adjacent to our Lents Cove, and it goes south at that point. So if you're looking at the power plant here, Nick knows where that is. Okay, so this is where the power plant is here. 60 acres north of that is potentially able to be redeveloped. So that's where DL English comes in. They have been working with Entergy. They have been on site twice to see if it's possible for that parcel to be developed. There's also other parcels that Entergy owns. So what we have gotten together is a list of potential developable properties here within the village. That has been forwarded to the state economic development people and also to DL English. So right now, they're researching that, the possibility of that happening. We have other lots that, and one thing you really have to understand, so we can all talk about what's going to be developed here, but we all have to understand, too, that this isn't our property. Entergy owns this property, so they would need to agree to sell this. My understanding is that the property, the 60 acres in the north that we're looking at, is not controlled by the NRC. So that's a good thing. And if you look at the site of Entergy, and I know you can't see it on camera, but if you look at the site of Entergy, basically they built in the center of their property. There's 240 acres, and it's right on the waterfront. It's a beautiful piece of property. So there's that piece. They also own property across the street on Broadway. Con Edison, if you look at this map, substantial amount of property they own here in the village. I've spoken to them already. The administrator and I have spoken to them, and if it doesn't hurt their future development, they might be interested in talking to us about what could be developed. Right now, this property, most of it is zoned for peaceful nuclear generation. So that's the zoning of this. So as we go along, we're going to be looking at what kind of development could potentially go in there, and then we would have to look into the zoning of that. So there's a lot of work to do here. In your packet, you'll see that there are a list of properties that can be developed. Tomorrow, we are meeting at 11 o'clock with Megan Taylor, who is the Regional Director of Economic Development in the state, and she will be walking some of these properties with us. We can't go far in, but we can look now, especially since the leaves have come down. We'll be able to see a better view of that. So if any of the committee members are available tomorrow at 11, we'll be meeting here at the Village Hall, so we can give her an overview. And like I said to her, I'm kind of a visual person. That's nice. You can give me this list of properties, but I really have to see it visually. Another interesting piece of property is next to the cemetery and close to where the pipeline is. There's about 15 to 16 acres in there. I understand somebody was interested in that property, but it's not zoned for what they were looking for. So there are certain properties here. But this development of property, that's one thing we're going to talk about, but that's not the total picture here, because it has to be a multifaceted approach. Right now, we're going to be losing approximately $3 million of our revenue. So with the development, that's not going to be the complete answer. So with this company, DL English Consultant Company, that the state has hired, the state task force has hired, they will have a report out by April of 2018. Also, with the many meetings that have gone on, Senator Murphy held a public hearing in Peekskill where local officials and labor leaders expressed their concerns because, let's face it, the school and the Village of Buchanan are being hurt really bad with our revenue sourcing. But there's over 1,000 well-paying jobs that are being lost. Not to mention, Entergy is still a good corporate neighbor. So a lot of grants went out to the library, the Village of Buchanan, the Rotary Club of Peekskill, so a lot of different organizations. So those organizations are going to be hurt also. But also there's the trickle-down effect of losing that many employees to our local business. So it's hard when you lose a major employer, but we're not the first community that's had that happen to them. So we were fortunate enough not to have 6 months time frame or a year time frame. We've had a couple of years before they close so that we can work on mitigation. At the June meeting, I went to Journal News, sponsored it in Clearwater, and it was an informational meeting, and it covered the decommissioning, and it also covered, there was a mayor there, and I've spoken about this before, but I just don't know if the whole committee understands what this is. They had a gentleman come in, Mayor Hill, from Zion, Illinois, that's going through the decommissioning process. When they started their decommissioning, they had economic devastation in their community. A lot of vacancies in the houses, like, so for example, they were getting close to $19 million in revenue, and they basically lost everything. So, now they're at the end of the decommissioning process, and Mayor Hill, his senator, and his congressman came up with a law that they have brought into Congress, and it's now there. And what it's called is the Stranded Act, and everyone in their folder has a copy of this. So I'm just going to hit a few points. So one thing you have to understand with the Stranded Act, it is not taxation on the spent fuel. It is not a taxation, because some people are saying it's taxing the spent fuel. Legally in New York State right now, that can't be done. So the Stranded Act, some of the highlights are the nuclear waste. They say to establish a nuclear waste task force, which is good. But here's where it benefits us greatly. In there is economic impact grants. It's a non-competitive grant to provide financial assistance to offset the economic and social impacts of stranded nuclear waste. The grant amount would equal $15 for each kilo of spent fuel stored in the community. So over at Indian Point, there is a pad now. They're going to have a total of 2 pads. I believe there's going to be 115 casks that will be stored on site. Those casks will be stored on site. There is no permanent repository in this country. I'm sure you've all heard of Yucca Mountain. Yucca Mountain so what they've done over the years, the government, and this has been going on for 30 years and there's still no resolution. What they've done is, from the ratepayers, they have taken money, the federal government, Department of Energy, and I think it's $34 billion at this point. $500 million of that has come out of Entergy, out of Indian Point. So that money was supposed to be used to find a permanent place to put the spent fuel. Well, that hasn't happened. They're saying the Yucca Mountain site is, there's geological problems, there's environmental problems, and I think basically it's a not in my backyard. Really, do you want? So I understand. I understand that. Right now, they're talking about East New Mexico, West Texas, to have a temporary storage site. And it's temporary, it's not a permanent. So I don't know how that's going to work out, because I've already mentioned at one of the Clearwater meetings that one of the plans, if we take this waste out of here, would go by barge down the Hudson River, under the Tappan Zee Bridge. It's the Tappan Zee Bridge. Tappan Zee Bridge. I'm like that. I can't change my mind. Yeah, under the Tappan Zee Bridge, and then it would go to a port in New Jersey, where at that point it would go on a railroad car and be transported. So that's one of the plans that they're thinking. So there's going to be pushback. They haven't settled Yucca Mountain in 30 years, so I really strongly believe that is going to be stored on site for some time. So under those circumstances, the mayor in Illinois and several other communities around the country, they have this spent fuel on site. So what would happen with the Stranded Act, per kilo, there would be, each year, you would get the money, because it's stored on site, to the local communities to help them with the economic impact. So this is just ongoing now, and we will see where that goes. Of course, we will be definitely on board with that. We passed a resolution last meeting So we really need to work with our Congresswoman Nita Lowey, and we also need to work with Senator Schumer and Senator Gillibrand. Yeah, I've asked Entergy to get me that information, so I think, I know where you're going. I see, you know the business people, I know where you're going, Jamie. You're looking at what it would be here, what would the, so I think it's about $1 million. Yeah.
And does that get divided proportionally between the village and the school, or is that strictly to the village or strictly to the school?
What they're trying to do is, like, within the community, the affected municipalities, it would go to. So I know what you're asking, is it 15 per community? That right now is basically what they're saying would be the fee. So, there would have to be an arrangement. Also on Monday, Congresswoman Nita Lowey will be here at the Village Hall at 11 o'clock, and she has some other proposals that she would like to introduce. So I don't know exactly what they are. I'll know on Friday what that looks like. So she has some thoughts on how to help, our community too. So we have a lot of work to do, and going forward. So this is just the tip of the iceberg. So some other interesting things, because what nuclear areas see when a plant gets closed is you see what they've seen is vacant houses, and so what they're trying to do is help the homeowner. They're trying to also help the businesses. So the new market tax credit would basically be to all nuclear affected communities and municipalities immediately bordering nuclear affected communities like us and the bordering. The program incentivizes private development in economically challenged areas, by providing investors with a tax credit up to 39% of the total investment realized over a period of 7 years. So what they're trying to do is draw business, big business into the area to help the tax base. Also, there's a new home buyer tax credit for nuclear affected communities. The bill would offer first-time home buyers a one-time refundable tax credit equal to 10% of the purchase price of the home, up to $8,000 for homes purchased in a nuclear affected community. But right now, I can tell you the home buyer, the situation with our property values is not happening. Realtors have spoken about this, and what's happening, a lot of the houses in the village are going up for sale, and within a week, they're sold. And they know, that our taxes, might be going up, and they realize that, but they want to move into this community. They understand what's happening. So this is an important bill. Also, like I said, Nita Lowey will be introducing some things also. There's been many NRC meetings, and those discussions are around decommissioning. That's something else I'd like us to just, really understand what decommissioning is. So we'll have a whole nother meeting on that. But also with the decommissioning process, we want to make sure that it's safe. This is our home here, it's in our backyard. So we just want to make sure that the plant is left safe. The Entergy is still responsible for the waste in the end. They have to have security there. So that's a whole nother thing. I could go on for hours with the decommissioning, but I just wanted to give you a general overview. We're not at that point with the decommissioning yet. So I figured let's deal with these things first. Trustee Funchin and myself have gone to a lot of the community unity meetings in the town of Cortland. Each month, there's a different speaker. They've covered many topics, but basically, those have been mostly informational. So, going forward, so that's my overview, basically, of lots of meetings, lots of information, different proposals, and a lot of balls in the air right now. So going forward, we are going to be working on an action plan. It's time for action now. So this committee will look to maintain the quality of life we enjoy, looking at our services, look at ways to mitigate the loss of revenue from Indian Point through economic development and cost cutting, be a voice in the decommissioning process, and also safeguard the security and look into the possible revenue of spent fuel rods that will be stored here for quite some time. And how can the village remain a viable and desirous place to live? And how, the most important thing is, how will we reinvent ourselves? Going back years ago, there was an amusement park. And in our historical room, you'll see a lot of pictures of the amusement park. In the mid-50s, I think it was around 50s, Con Edison bought the property. And early 60s, the nuclear power plant went online. We were probably one of the first nuclear power plants in the country that went online. So people now are like, oh, how could they have built that there? Well, you know, in the early 60s and the 50s, nobody really knew what nuclear power was. Nobody understood what it was. But, you know, it served our community well for many, many years. We had, at one time, Con Edison paid 95% of our village taxes. And then in early 2000, Joe, you were on board then, right? When the pilot was negotiated. So Entergy bought the property, the pilot was negotiated, and we went from 95% to 50% of what the nuclear power plant is paying. So, and I think the taxes went up 102%.
That's because going to court, facing this, we understood that other places tried the same thing.
Yeah.
They lost it in courts. That we didn't want to be faced with that kind of situation.
Well, that also happened at the last negotiation also with the pilot program. There are a lot of other communities. It was, the state didn't help us at the time either. I'll be honest with you, the state did not help us with this. So it's very difficult to assess a nuclear power plant. We brought an expert in, an engineer expert on this type of a thing, and he basically told us roughly what it would be worth and to kind of go towards that. So by doing the pilot, it was, it assured us of a steady income, and, you know, the town agreed. We negotiated with the town and with the school, and the Village of Buchanan all negotiated.
In between that time,
Oh, use the mic, Joe. Grab the mic.
between that time, if not recall that the Power Authority took over part of the operation, which also caused us to lose some tax revenue because you can't tax the state on certain things. So that was part of the package.
Right, that was Unit 3, yeah, the State
Unit
Power
3, I
Authority
believe it
owned.
was. So the state didn't help us much in that case.
No. So, but they've offered assistance now, so we will definitely look forward to that. So we're working with them closely, and that's kind of what I know at this point. That's where we are. One of the things we're going to be setting up in the next couple of weeks for the committee and for the board, we are going to go over, it's in the process now, we're going to go over on-site at Indian Point to actually look at the storage, the pads, to actually go over there. Because, you know, we can talk about the spent fuel, but if you don't know what it looks like, how big it is, where it's going to be stored, you know, it's kind of hard to make, you know, a decision of what it's going to be. As I've gone to some of these meetings, some of the suggestions have been with the nuclear waste to spread it out all over the facility, all over the 240 acres. And, no. And so it'll be on 2 pads. And the second pad has not yet been constructed. And I also mentioned to Jerry Nappy from Entergy yesterday, because we had a meeting here, I mentioned to him that we would like to also see some of that 60 acres. We can only see some of it. It goes along the water and goes, some of it is rocky, some of the topo is a little tough, but at least we can kind of get a concept of what that looks like. Okay, so we have a field trip coming up. Fun.
Right.
Yeah, we like field trips. So that is my update. That's where we are. Like I said, decommissioning would be like a whole nother hour, but I think this is a lot of information right now, and I don't want to, overwhelm you and see you put your hair on fire and go running out the door. Especially Nick. So, also in this packet I have for you is a committee that was formed, oh my gosh, I don't know how many years ago. I wasn't on the board at the time, but it's called the Final Budget Committee. And is the date on here? I'm sorry. I haven't looked at this in a while. But what this did was, it was a really good report, and it looked at all of our services and made some suggestions. Some of them have been implemented, but, some food for thought on how that looks. So Nick, do you have any comments?
I think it was around 2000 and, between 2005 and 2007, somewhere in there.
Okay, all right.
Do I have?
Yeah, do you have any comments?
Oh, if I can, a couple of
Absolutely.
points of information on stuff that came up. The mayor was mentioning that we're using the maps that show which areas are, which parcels are not developed, and who owns them. Con Edison owns a lot of undeveloped property in this village. Some of it is affected by power lines, some of it is not. If you go to the village website, villageofbuchanan.com, there is a link called GIS Mapping. That's a county-based mapping service, and if you click on the GIS Mapping, you can then see a link that says for the Village of Buchanan to search parcels. It will bring up a map of the village. You can zoom in, you can click on any parcel in the village, be it Con Edison or be it your house. You can click on it, and it will show you the lot number and who the owner of that property is. If you're interested in examining what parcels are open around the village, you can see this on the village website, GIS Mapping link. And another point of information, only slightly, not exactly related to what we're doing, but it just came up, was the name of the Tappan Zee Bridge. Change.org, it's an online petitioning nonprofit, and chances are, I agreed on, there were one or two things I wanted to sign up with, and now I get emails about all these things I do not want to sign. But anyway, they have online petitions, and there is an online petition right now to keep the name of the Tappan Zee Bridge as the Tappan Zee Bridge. Or the legislation to change the name to the Mario Cuomo Bridge was kind of shoved into one of these big legislative packages so that people voted on some other bill, and without, having much say in it, passed that part of it. So it was kind of a flaky legislation, although it's a legal legislation. You can go to change.org if you want to sign a petition to keep it the Tappan Zee Bridge.
Change
Just
is
those
difficult.
Two points of
They're also
information.
up to about 240,000 signatures.
Yes, it's going fast, because I think a
I
lot of
got on
people feel
Twitter
that way.
today. I got the one.
Yeah, I was driving to the city the other day, and I saw a sign for some tunnel, and I had no idea where it was, because they renamed a tunnel that I'd been calling, there's 3 or 4 tunnels in New York, and they've had the same name for 50, 60, 70 years. All of a sudden, it's the U Carry Tunnel, and I had no idea what tunnel they were talking about.
Well, we're going to still keep Village of Buchanan.
Well, that's a different
There you
story. I also want to
That's settled.
mention that, we mentioned that there's a comprehensive plan committee, when some people introduce themselves, and that group there's a little overlap. That probably will be a committee that'll hopefully complete its work before the 2021 committee, it stops ceases to be. But there is overlap, and part of what we're both dealing with is how to bring economic development to the village. What parcels do we target? What do we have to do first? What kind of things do we want to attract? What kind of things do we not want to attract? And what rundown parcels could be reclaimed, properties that could be reclaimed for improvements. So there is overlap with those two committees, and that committee, if anyone's interested, meets on the third Tuesday of every month at the Village Hall at 7 p.m. Otherwise, thank you. You've given us a great summary.
I think the overlap is with the other committee and this committee is the reuse of the properties and the zoning, so.
Yeah, this will be taking on more things than that, I think.
Yeah, it's going to be the whole spectrum. Does anyone have any questions? No? Okay. I gave the best summary. Joe, did you have something?
Yeah, I'm just curious. With this decommissioning, the construction of it, the buildings and so forth, are we going to lose all the assessments from these buildings before they even, whatever they're going to do, tear down or whatever the case may be? Because you've got other locations on that site that still
Their training
have nothing to
building.
do with the nuclear plant itself. We still have to have the assessments on those buildings.
Well,
Unless they become vacated and nothing there, but I don't see where that's going to
I
happen.
think the training building was separate, but any business that gets into a situation like that, what they'll do, the nuclear end of it could take 7 to 10 years if they go the fast track to decommission. Otherwise, it's up to Entergy how they want to decommission. Right now, there's 1.7 billion fund that they have to decommission 3 plants.
Okay.
Because one has not been decommissioned. The dome has come down, but that's still there. They feel that that 1.7 billion is enough money to do the decommissioning. But Entergy is the one that makes the decision based on that money, if there's enough money, whether they can do a safe store, which is 60 years. They have up to 60 years to pull that down. So that won't be decided until closer when they're going to close, what route they're taking. In Vernon, Vermont, they're working now on another company other than themselves coming in to do the decommissioning. So that's still up in the air. That has not been approved. So, there's different things. So when you talk about that, most of their property is under the pilot program.
Right.
So the first year, 30%. 30 goes down.
30% less.
Yes,
Yeah.
30, goes down another 30% until they're at 10% of what they're paying now, which for us would look at,
That's a total package?
yeah,
What they're paying?
yeah. So we'd be looking at 300,000 compared to 3 million after those years.
But the pilot program ends at the same time.
The pilot program will end, I believe, in 2024.
So as soon as they hit that 10% number roughly, then it's up for renegotiation again, yes?
Yes, it would be
So you
once
have
it
those
finishes.
So you would start the negotiations in advance anyway.
Right, yes, they would be started. But here's the key. When businesses close, a lot of times they'll start taking down buildings that they're assessed for. One of the things too, what was I going to say? That the decommissioning process is just a whole nother thing. I forgot what I was going to say. We were talking about the pilot, we were talking about.
The end of the pilot is you're gonna, at the same time that pilot program comes to an end as far as an agreement standpoint, is the same time that they start where they hit the end of their bottom of the payment.
Okay,
Right.
yes. So what I wanted to say about that, once a nuclear power plant ceases operation, the cords or whatever that go across the road to the transmission lines to Con Edison get cut. They're done. They don't refuel. Once they stop, there's no refueling. It's over. What happens at that point, Entergy does not pay taxes for that. The company itself does not pay. The money for taxes, for security, for whatever expenses they have, come out of that decommissioning fund at that point.
That one concept.
Yes.
Is that part of their administration function too? You know, the other building that's there?
Yeah, I think the administration building is separate. I think it's a separate,
That has nothing to do with the pilot.
I don't think it does. I don't believe.
The administration building is part of the, is a percentage, I don't remember the exact number, but it is part of that negotiated package.
But they're not going to want to.
The pilot agreement includes.
Or to take
I didn't
down,
realize you did that.
No, the admin building, when the administration building went in, the existing pilot agreement was amended upward for, it probably amounts to, 5% or less of the total pilot amount, but it was amended upward to allow for the administration building. So the pilot agreement does include language about the administration building.
it's done a couple years ago.
It was an add-on when it went in.
So the other thing too, so we're looking at approximately 300,000 from them. There's talk about renegotiating.
That's 300,000 that they pay just to the village.
Yes.
Correct.
Yeah.
And the pilot is, the terms are the same, that the town and the school district have the same terms in terms of going from 100% payment. First year after closure goes to 70, second year to 40, third year goes to 10%, and then it stays 10% for the duration of the pilot agreement. Either party can terminate the pilot agreement if it is in their interest at any time. So the pilot agreement currently, I don't remember the exact year, you said 2024?
I believe it's 2024 because we did it.
You know, if at some point we feel that we can do better through an assessment approach instead of a pilot approach, it's something we could look at.
And does it have to be a coordinated effort with both the town and the school, or can the village?
We can
decide
separately
without
negotiate.
going?
We can go separately. We generally have done that together because it gives us a little bit more negotiating bite. But technically, we can go at it,
Yeah,
separately.
we'd
And-
look at that
and believe me,
differently.
if anybody, any of those parties determine that they can do better through assessing the plant, but then as Mr. Tropiano said, then you could possibly be subject to litigation. So, a legal battle, you're dealing with a
Corporate giant.
a very large corporation with high-powered attorneys, and we have a
get
good
the best
attorney, and we can hire
negotiation.
specialists, but it would be very, very costly. It's very costly. So, but it's a possibility.
We have, so we're looking at that. I was able to, at the 11th and a half hour, negotiating separately with Entergy, I was able to get $250,000 for infrastructure. Since they're the largest employer, they use our wastewater plant, the roads, et cetera, et cetera. So that's another part of the negotiation. There's still going to be, what I understand is when the first plant goes down, they're not letting any of their employees go. They're still going to maintain their employees on site until the second plant is cut down. So they'll still be using quite a bit of our infrastructure, so that's something we will be discussing. I know the town and the school district were interested in renegotiating. Of course, we are too, but, that's a two-way street, and that would be up to Entergy if they would be willing to renegotiate. So I don't know. That's a big question mark.
Part of it is what you said, which is the potential assessment of the nuclear waste storage. It's sort of a not fully explored area at this point.
That's something Sandy Galiff at one time had kind of looked into, because it has to be approved through the state. It's not considered, I guess the reason why it's not considered real property, because it could be moved. But that's not going anywhere. We all know that.
There's no place to put it.
No, so, you know what I mean? So it's like, it's one of those battles, yeah. So when the last, in 2018, it will be the last refueling for the plant that goes down in 2020. And it's quite interesting, I know people are concerned about the storage, but they're not very light. They're encased in concrete and steel. And if you actually saw the little vehicle that takes it from the pool over to the pad, it doesn't even look like it's moving. It's unbelievably heavy. So,
I'm guessing it's an armed store, but they're still armed security there.
absolutely, yes, they have to, yes.
You don't put up a barbed wire fence and go home.
No, they
It's
have to
probably
stay.
a lot easier to secure a small area than
Yeah.
an entire facility.
Yeah, because when I was up in Vermont, that's what they did. They fenced it off, and there's still security there.
24/7.
Yes, yeah.
They're a very well-trained security force. They do a lot of tactical stuff,
Yeah.
practice it.
Oh, no. So,
The security force does great. I have a friend who's a
Yeah.
security.
yeah, well-trained. So,
I would guess on that pool, they also put a no swimming sign.
yes, there's no swimming in the nuclear pool. It's very clear, it's beautiful, but, yeah, no, you don't want to swim in there.
It's a relief.
Yes, it's good to know.
Yeah, everyone should be warm.
Yeah.
I do have a question about the
Sure.
structures.
Okay.
From what I'm understanding, I believe is that...
microphone, because we want to
Oh,
make sure.
Yes.
Okay.
The structures that house the nuclear reactors, they're going to be there indefinitely.
No, that's part of the decommissioning process, and that's where Entergy decides when they will come down. So if there's enough money in the 1.7 billion fund, then that will happen. What I really think we need to move forward with is the Stranded Act, make sure we get some other kind of money, because honestly, that's nice, we have the 1.7 billion, but that should be designated for the decommissioning. I don't want to see that money used up, and we're stuck with all that stuff for 60 years.
Yes.
That's prime property over there. So, we want to make sure it gets decommissioned and, because everybody has great ideas for this $1.7 billion, but that money needs to be used for the decommissioning. So we need to look at other revenue sources. Also, one of the things, maybe I'll have Entergy or someone from Entergy come in to discuss, during the negotiation, we were not privy to the negotiation. The Village of Buchanan, which is really us and the school, the Verplank Fire Department, the Hendrick Hudson Library, those are the biggest people that are getting hurt. The town, I think it's 2% of their budget. I think they're looking at $800,000. I wish we were only losing 800. I could take care of that. But, so there's a $15 million fund that was agreed on, and it is for the communities surrounding, and it's also for environmental. So it's not all for environmental. So we can talk about what we'd like to see done with that $15 million. That money will not be available until the plant closes, but there's different options. Whether it's on-site, whether it's in the Village of Buchanan. So we're the community that gets impacted because we're the host community. We're right on the front line. So we have been for years known as the smallest community with 2 nuclear power plants. Now, once they close, we've been talking about it on the board, how are we going to reinvent ourselves? What are we going to be? And I know I'd like to see Amazon move in because these discussions would just end. But, yeah.
One of the things you mentioned about the decommissioning of the second plant is that effectively the power lines would be cut.
Yes.
So are we also looking at the Con Ed property as part of this process and the related power lines that still go through that land?
They have just spent, Con Edison, $3 million updating their what do they call it, switch yard. So they're not going away. I don't know what's in the cards, but they just hardened their whole system.
Yeah, it just seems like that after decommissioning, that's a dead end right there, unless it's hooked up to something else that brings power.
Yeah, I think it would not be too hard to determine, but there's a power grid that will have to stay there. It gets fed by other sources. And the direct feeder lines, I'm not exactly sure which lines are direct feeder lines from the nuclear plant into that grid, but most of what you see as you drive around the area is part of the grid. Some of the very local lines might be specifically to take plant power from there. I don't see that they would rush to do anything there, because, you know, maybe at some point they would discuss using that commercial property for some other energy producing facility. We don't know. Right now, you know, there's no specific plan. Lots of people have come up with ideas, whether it's on their, you know, just people like us sitting around rooms and discussing it, or other businesses. You know, I'm sure a lot of ideas have been thrown around, but nothing's really advanced enough to even begin to figure out what's going to happen there. And that's also distinguished between two things at the Entergy property. The mayor referred to the 60 or 70 or so acres on the north end of the plant, which is actually a wooded parcel. It's undeveloped, pretty much native land. It's our Lens Cove Park, that is a village park, forms the northern border of that. The power plant forms the southern border of it, and there's about 60 or 70 acres, I don't know the exact number, in between. It's a hilly, wooded parcel, very beautiful land, actually. I've walked parts of it. It's like being, you know, you're in the woods. You can't see the plant. You can't see, and if you're in the middle, you can't see the river either. That property has potential in a shorter term, not immediate, but in a shorter term, and that's what the mayor referred to, which is being studied now by a consulting firm. DL English is a consulting firm for the state, I believe.
Yes.
Yeah.
That is
And the other parcel where all the nuclear buildings are, nothing's going to happen too fast there. Let's be, you know, realistic about this. Even if they go on the accelerated program, by the time everything closes, even on the most accelerated programs possible, nothing's going to be possible there in a dream world for 13, 14, 15 years, and very possibly for double that. Entergy originally had a 30-year time frame to decommission that plant. The $1.7 billion they have in a fund is probably not sufficient. They had a 30-year window, which the NRC, in just the last year, extended to give them 60 years. So that just happened, and, you know, Entergy is a business. They've been a good neighbor. They've given us grants for this and that, but they are a business, and a lot of their decisions are going to be based on business. They're not going to be deliberately trying to screw anybody, but they are a business. And, you know, if the NRC says you can, you know, you have 60 years, you know, there may be some way to spin off that undeveloped property in a more timely fashion that would benefit us.
Well, that's what we're hoping for.
But that nuclear property and the reactor domes, don't hold your breath. We want to work towards, you know, I mean, we're up against the state, federal government, and the NRC, and you know, it's a tough road to hoe, as they say, to get an accelerated program there. Hopefully we can, and then, like I said, in the best possible scenario, you said 7 to 10 years on the timetable for the Vermont Yankee plant, and we're talking about 7 to 10 years after the plant closes. Entergy will submit a decommissioning plant the year they're closing. That's when they're required to do it. They have to submit a plan to the NRC. Maybe at that point, which is in 3 or 4 years, following the most intensive possible program, we could see something there in 12, being cleared out within 12 years. But that's the ultimate thing we could hope for.
Yeah. Plus, you know, when they decommission, all the structure has to come down, so they need room for the decommissioning to do that.
Yep.
But I wanted to answer your question too, Sal. There are 2 gas-fired new plants that are coming online. One is having a problem with the DEC. But here's my biggest concern. I'm going to put this right out here. From Canada, I'm sure you've all heard of the electric line, the Champlain Hudson line, that they're considering, that would come down the Hudson River Supposedly, the plans right now are for it to go into the Queens area. But let's think about this. How perfect would that be to come right into the Village of Buchanan, to hook up into the infrastructure that's now there? So I have a concern about that. And they've done their upgrades. They just have to send the line down. Right now, the line is planned to come ashore, I believe, in Stony Point across the river. But the original plan is to send it into Queens. But how much cheaper and easier and quicker would that be for them to hook into Con Edison? Yeah.
So what's the benefit and what's the loss of that happening? What's the negative?
I'm understanding there's, on the other side of the river, I'm understanding it's a good financially for them, it's a boon. I'm going to try to get more information on that for the next meeting. I did read something on that. The benefit is really for the state to replace the power, because you're looking at 1,000 megawatts. Entergy produces 2,000 megawatts. So that line alone is 1,000 megawatts. I'm not a proponent of it. I don't think we should be at the mercy of another country for electric power. Second of all, most importantly too, is I don't think for employment. I mean, how does that help us? Maybe the installation of it, but how does that help us? So,
Do you know what kind of footprint it requires
I don't think it's a cable. I don't think it needs a lot. You know, that's something, you know, we could look, I'm concerned about that, so I just want to put that out there.
I think that, excuse me, it's a little bit of a pipe dream what they're thinking about. I just happened to be involved at one time when I was at the phone company about the power line coming down.
Oh, the Champlain, yeah. Mhm.
And they ran into environmental issues. I was at a couple of meetings at the time, and they all said, well, what do we do about here, and what do we do about the meadows, and what do we do about the fish, and what do we do about...
You'd be disturbing the bed of the Hudson,
There was a lot of
yeah.
concern about that, and then it kind of disbanded,
Okay.
because the cost was prohibitive. So that was one of the things that I mean, it happens, you can say you're going to bring it down, but there's more to it than just bringing it down to tie in. Now, the towers that exist now are really not conducive to what they want to do, because there's no more room. And that's going to be the end of a problem if they start putting more towers up to take these high lines coming through.
Well, they
That's
would
a
be
problem.
losing the 2,000 megawatts that they take
right.
now. So I think they'd be able to pick up the 1,000 megawatts pretty quick.
That's about it. Because
You know.
they're feeding now from different places. Up at Gilderland, which I happen to be privileged to go in, where they have all the local, I'm saying local, Pennsylvania, Vermont, so forth, where they come into the grid and then they distribute it from there. And they can't get enough sometimes to do it, because they have to go out to get it. So I don't know how this is going to work out for them at this particular point.
Yeah. I don't
It's
know.
really
There's a lot of
big study that
questions.
They have to do, a lot of questions.
The
that
state
they're just
feels
gonna
comfortable that they'll...
Close this down and say, okay, you've had it.
Yeah, well, the state feels comfortable that they'll be able to replace the power.
Well,
That's the statement now,
I can
and I
visualize a
can't,
gas turbine thing more so than I can do anything.
yeah. So, yeah,
Very
some
interesting.
answers, some questions, lots of questions, not too many answers right now. Yeah,
No doubt about it. It's easy to say, close it down, but that's not the answer.
no,
How do you compensate for it? That's the big question.
yeah.
Like you said, not in my backyard. That's the problem.
Well, we were lucky for many years, you know, there were really no problems with the plants, and I'll get pushback on that about the O-rings and everything else that the plant has dealt with. But I will tell you that Entergy is very good about maintaining. If there's a problem, they take care of it. So I've seen both operations of both companies, and they run a tight ship. So I'm not concerned about the plant. I've toured it several times. I'm just not concerned.
Yeah.
So,
Of course,
but we're
we're
losing.
dealing with Energy and Con Ed with the property.
Right.
So there's two different things that we have to deal with in this case if we're looking for additional property for the village. So
Yes.
that's very important too,
Mm-hmm.
to negotiate with them.
And there are a few parcels on 9A that are available too, but. So like I said, we have the list in your folders of the property, those properties. We have the land use map. We have that financial committee that got together. And so that's, and any information that that we need, I will get for you. The administrator would be very willing to help you out with that too. Any subjects you'd like us to cover more in depth at the next meeting, please let me know. I'm going to get everybody the contact list so we can stay in communication. And I think one of the big things we need to really work on now is to really look at the economic development piece, what our opportunities might be. What do you think, Jamie? Amazon, right? Jeremy, Amazon.
Yeah.
Oh, darn.
I would just point out that in the last week or so, I've spoken to a couple of local business people. One is also a developer, and one has a business in the village that involves real estate. And it's very clear to me already that, talking to these people, that people do want to build in Buchanan. We have sewers, and it's a very big factor. People have to go somewhere. A lot of people won't even buy someplace where they have to go by septic. And if you're doing a large business and and the septic system can get awfully complicated. If you're doing multifamily, septics get pretty sprawling, complicated. Having sewers is one of our biggest assets. Location's another big asset. You can commute to the city from here. You have access to some other great river towns, to great outdoor hiking, river recreation. So we have great location, and we have some things that are appealing to developers. We have to focus on obstacles to developers, like unsightly properties, for one. So, but the mayor just mentioned we have to look at the economic development side of it. We do have some things going for us, and I think that's part of what this group will be, as well as the comprehensive plan committee is focusing on.
I wanted to mention something too. Also, Trustee Funchin, who couldn't make it this evening, worked customs for many years, and he has told me that there is a customs port on the water where, I believe it's where Continental, where the sheetrock company is. So that's interesting. I think over in that area, I think you'll be mostly developing industrial. It's going to be like I'm just thinking like an industrial park, a company. I've been talking to a real estate person who does all commercial and does a lot of it in the area. And what he's told me is a lot of the city has outpriced itself. So when you're looking at the Bronx, Queens, and these people are looking to move further north. With Louisa Street, we have a good entrance there for businesses to come on and off there. So it's off a main highway. So I'm just thinking, and I know people are saying, "Oh, what is she crazy? This is, no, you can't think that way. You got to think positive. You got to keep moving forward. We're not throwing the towel in here. And I have mentioned it, that before Con Edison bought the property, I understand that IBM wanted to have their headquarters here. So it would be a different place now if IBM had come in and put their world corporate headquarters. I guess, for some reason that didn't work out, and we ended up with 3 nuclear power plants. But hey, that's how it is. So, that's going in the 50s, early 60s when that was happening. So think about the world now, how many years later, how business has spread out in the state and things. So, you know what, we're going to think out of the box, and I've got a good group here. There's some business people. There's some people who have been here all their lives. Everybody's got their heart into this, and that's what's important. Is that it, team? Okay. I gave you as much of a general overview as I could. any questions, the next meeting, we'll get in more in depth. Okay, so thank you for coming, and thank everyone for volunteering, and have a great Buchanan Day. No, thank you.